Good morning and welcome to the next session of our Tech Talk. It has been an amazing morning so far, and we are so excited to join our next presenter. Ms. Carla Jefferson is here to introduce our next topic of critical thinking. So we are going to kick it off with Ms. Carla Jefferson. But before we get started, we are going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So you have a chat box where you can type some questions in there, and we have moderators with a wrench that are going to be answering your questions throughout today's session. We also hope that you will like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. So you'll see a little thumbs up below. So if you could click that and subscribe to our YouTube channel, we will greatly appreciate that. And please follow us as well. Join us on Twitter at EdTechPBC, and throughout today's session and all of our TED Talk, if you can tweet, we have lots of prizes that we'll be giving away. And so we hope to see you on Twitter throughout the session. Today, we are joined by Carla Jefferson, who will be speaking about critical thinking. And then our next session will be at 11:50. And Kevin Honeycutt will be rounding out our day speaking about collaboration. So we hope that you'll join us for our final session this afternoon. I had mentioned about tweeting, and we have some great prizes provided by Adobe. They're going to be providing these wonderful creative learner kits that are mailed to your home with these great t-shirts and little cards that are full of spark ideas. And so we encourage you to tweet using at EdTechPBC and hashtag PBTechTalk. So let's get critical. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Carla Jefferson.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I am so excited to be here with you, and I have a huge love for the 4Cs, and so I'm really excited to talk about critical thinking and how we can utilize that in the classroom. As Dana shared, I'm Carla Jefferson, and I am an instructional technology coordinator, but I am also the newly appointed, back in August, director of our Darlington County School District Virtual Academy. And that academy was created specifically for parents and students who were hesitant to go back in a face-to-face session, learning session. And so we have about currently we are at about 3,600 students, K-12, that we work with directly or, solely through virtual learning. And so, again, the 4Cs are near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to share just a little bit about my story and how that plays in. So as an instructional technology coordinator in South Carolina, we have where teachers have to exhibit technology proficiency. And so we are an Apple district. We're one-to-one with MacBooks for our high school students, and for our K-8 students, we're one-to-one with iPads. And so the state allows the district to decide what they want it to, how they want teachers to demonstrate proficiency, because everybody's in a different place. And so we decided that teachers would submit what we call a yearly portfolio submission, in addition to getting professional development hours with technology that focuses on student integration. And so as we transitioned every year, we want to push our teachers just a little bit harder. And so in the portfolio, that portfolio is tied directly to the 4Cs. And so initially, when we first started out, They would use critical thinking, and then when you would look at the how they used critical thinking, you would see that it was that students just did a Google search. And so we made some adjustments, and we worked with our teachers about like how critical thinking can be used beyond the Google search. And that's kind of what I want to share with you all today. So, in this session, we're going to talk about the importance of critical thinking. We're going to look at some definitions, like what students can do to demonstrate critical thinking in the classroom. And then I'm going to give you a few easy ways to integrate that critical thinking and problem solving process in your classroom. The great thing about critical thinking, though, is that it is always going to encompass the other C's. And so, although this session isn't about creation, we're going to talk about how students can share their learning and their thought process using digital tools, which ties in that creation a little bit as well. And I think you'll see a few tools that you may have already talked about this morning. So I want us to look at this quote and then just kind of have a quick conversation about it. Critical thinking has long been a valued skill in society. Today, every student, not just the academically advanced, needs it. While critical thinking and problem solving used to be the domain of gifted students, now it's a critical domain for every student. And that's from the NEA's and Educator's Guide to the 4 C's, which is a really good document. And so I want us to talk about that in the chat for just a little bit. Um, as we look at the quote, all right, why is it important? And this gets into another one of my passions, which is equity. Why is it important that all students participate in activities that will allow them to think critically? And I'll give you some time to drop in the chat, and then I'll kind of share my thoughts with you as well. Why is it important that all students have access and participate in activities that allow them to think critically? Boy, that wait time is hard when you're digital, isn't it? Yes, thank you. Critical thinking is a life skill necessary for everyone. The world is changing. Exactly. Adriana says the world is changing. So every student needs to be able to think and share their thoughts and ideas, which is so true. Because we want our students to be lifelong learners and to be productive citizens in our community. So, learning critical thinking, we know, leads to development of other skills, right? Higher level of concentration, deeper analytical abilities, and improved thought processing. And one of my favorite quotes is, "We cannot teach children what to think, but how to think." And when we think about school, although we've brought devices in some cases, there hasn't been a lot of change with how we provide instruction and what we have students to do. And so I talk to my teachers frequently who ask us about, how do I stop my students from Googling the answers? How about we provide them questions that Google really won't be able to answer? And no matter what kids end up doing in life, whether they decide to go on to college, whether they go to 2-year school, or in the military, or even the workforce, there are places where they're really just going to have to think, when they make these decisions or when they're given instructions. And so, even, funny, not funny, we frequently hear from every above grade band that the kids aren't ready, right? When they come to us in kindergarten, the parents, they're not ready, right? And then from home, and then when they go to elementary school, they say that, oh, they're not prepared in the middle and high. And so I had a conversation with a college professor, um, i.e., my brother, who says that when you send them to us from public school, they're not ready. And I looked at him and I said, well, when you send them back to us as first year teachers, they're not quite ready either. So it's a it's a cycle, right? And how do we help that make sure that, if I decide that I want to work in McDonald's, and my supervisor tells me to mop the floor, but there is trash on the floor, I have to know that I need to sweep the floor before I mop it without him having to say, now don't forget, you've got to sweep the floor before you mop it, you know. So just, and it's also pushing kids, you know, to be able to think for themselves, and especially in this day and age with the news and trying to determine what's accurate, what's not. I spent a lot of time having conversations with friends as we talk about the potential vaccination, and like, how do we research and figure out what's correct, right? What information is best? And so how do we get kids to think, to be able to make these decisions for ourselves? And sometimes as adults we get a little frustrated with that, right? Because we want to be the holder of all the information. And I can remember thinking about, you know, how well I'm, you know, going to be able to do that. But now when they can search via Google, we definitely need to adjust the way the activities that we have students do, and the way we allow them to be inquisitive. And so like you know, I'm pretty old school. And I know, like, growing up, my mom, like, you didn't question if an adult told you to do something, you didn't question that, you know, or whatever. And that translated over into the classroom. And now it's important that kids ask us questions, and that we, if we don't know, we show our vulnerability and we find it out together. And so, and that's not being disrespectful, you know, that's just being inquisitive. So when we look at the definition of critical thinking, oh, I love that, Serena. Google is only as good as the Googler. Absolutely. Let's look at these different pieces of critical thinking. So, ways that, like, one of the definitions is we want students to be able to reason effectively, right? Using that information, to the information that they get, to see whether it's appropriate, whether it's true, whether it's coming from a factual source, and how can I then share my findings with my teachers, my classmates, and my favorite part, with the world. We also want them to use systems thinking, analyze how parts of a whole interact with each other to produce overall outcomes in complex systems. And so that's a conversation that I have with my good friend Rhett Hughes, who teaches U.S. history. And so in South Carolina, there is an end of course test for U.S. history, but they have not really had a standardized test since middle school. Social studies. And so they struggle because middle school and elementary, the standardized test is really just memorization. If I can remember the definitions, then I'm going to do pretty well on that standardized test. But when it comes to that U.S. history test, they have to think how the different pieces in history connect. And so it goes back to that quote, like, we have to remember our past so that we don't repeat it. Like, those who forget the past are doomed to repeat it. So how does what happened for the Holocaust affect other things that happen in other places? We also need, when we talk about critical thinking, making judgments and decisions. So we see effectively analyze and evaluate evidence, arguments, claims, and beliefs. Analyze and evaluate major alternative points of view. And so, like, having those conversations with each other to agree and disagree are very important. Even in my classroom, and I taught middle school for 14 years, I love middle school kids. When we discussed right or wrong answers, it wasn't just, I think the answer is this. They would have to say, I think the answer is this because, like, they would have to give their justification in order, like, using the text evidence that they found. And so having students look at text and other situations and math and those kind of things, and be able to back up that with evidence and arguments and claims, that is so important. Also, with making judgments and decisions, synthesizing and make connections between information and arguments, interpret information and draw conclusions based on the best analysis. and then reflect critically on learning experiences and processes. And so that's something important for us to do, but also for our students to be responsible for. When I left the classroom, we had transitioned over into student led conferences for Parent Teacher Conference Day because we wanted the kids to be able to adequately convey their strengths, their weaknesses, and why they needed help or what they needed help on and ways that they could find the help that they needed. And I think that's powerful when you hear children say, what their current strengths are, what are things that they need to work on, and that they have a plan. So instead of students finishing an assignment and saying, I'm done, what do you want me to do next, teacher? They already know that there are things that they need to work on. So it's also that, using or teaching those critical skills and critical thinking skills and problem solving skills helps them to become independent learners. And then solving different kinds of unfamiliar problems in both conventional and innovative ways, which we know we are preparing, we've heard this all the time. We are preparing children for jobs that haven't even been created yet. And I say that for myself. When I graduated from high school in 1993 and college in 1997, there was no such thing as an instructional technology coordinator or a specialist or a facilitator. Like, we just weren't there yet. And so that was a job that wasn't created, that I had to build the skill set for myself. And even when those jobs first became available, we really didn't have a good idea of what they wanted to look like. And I was really lucky because I got a chance to build my job in the way that I wanted to, that I thought would best affect change in my school district with our students and with our teachers. And then identify and ask significant questions that clarify various points of view and lead to better solutions, right? And again, they're not being disrespectful. They want to know, which I think is so powerful. And to give them a voice in their classroom, to make decisions. And so we would have conversations with middle schoolers if they felt like things weren't working right. I'd say, okay, what do you think is a better solution? And we would talk it through. And sometimes I would go with what they said, and sometimes I didn't, but that's just kind of the way it works. But we want them to be their own person. We don't want to, when in the past, when we look at the way schools were created, they were created using that Ford assembly line model, right? You do the same job over and over and over again. And we see that that is no longer the case. Like now they have to be able to do multiple things, and they have to figure out how to solve those problems, to be able to get to the solutions that will make our country better, that will make our community better and stronger. So now we're going to talk about ways to integrate critical thinking in the classroom. And so I'm going to show you a few examples. I am going to definitely give you the entire presentation after this is all over. But if you want to have just some of the examples that we're going to look at right now and spend some time talking about, then you can grab that bit.ly that is currently on the screen. So I'll give you maybe a minute, a couple of seconds to do that, and then we'll transition and we'll look at just a few examples. I didn't want to overwhelm you today, but like I said, you'll have the presentation after the fact, because I can only imagine. I just know what it's like. Like even a half day of sessions, your brains are almost on overload with all of the information that you get. Now, I'm going to tell you, for me, even being an instructional technology coordinator, content and pedagogy are always going to come first for me. And so we have conversations with teachers. We have a annual technology conference for our teachers that we host. And so in those conversations or in the session descriptions, the content comes first. And so that's what you'll see in these examples. And a lot of these are examples that my teachers have actually submitted for some of their digital portfolios. So I think that link is in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and we're going to look at some examples here. So podcasting using Anchor. I am a huge podcaster, which is ironic because I don't really listen to podcasts. But I podcast. I have the DCSD Transforms um, podcast that I do with my colleague, Rhett Hughes, which is currently on hiatus because of COVID. But for those, podcasting is a digital broadcast made available on the internet. And it is so simple to be able, it's so simple to use using the tool Anchor. And we'll take a look at that as well. So my teachers, high school teachers, they give a summer reading project that students have to do, and they noticed that kids just really weren't reading. Um, they just weren't. They over the summer that was like the last thing that they wanted to do, and so one of the teachers decided to instead of doing a summer reading project, it ended up being a summer listening project, listening to the podcast Serial. Have any of you, are any of you all familiar with the Serial podcast? So I'm going to give you just like a brief overview, and then I'm going to let you listen to what the students created. So with the serial broadcast, the focal point is that there is a person that is in prison for the murder of his girlfriend. They were in high school. And so with Serial, she the person that is over the podcast, she kind of investigates the entire process and the procedure of the trial. She interviews people that were a part of the trial, and so you hear different viewpoints from different people. And every episode, which Red introduced me to, every time I listen to an episode, like the first episode, you'll say, there's no way he did it. And then the second episode, you're like, oh my God, he totally different did it. So it takes you on a roller coaster ride. And so what they had students to do was they listen to the podcast or key episodes in the podcast, and then they had to create an argument as to whether or not Adnan was innocent or guilty. Now, here's the thing. One of the things that the kids were super stoked to hear about is that podcast caused for the trial to be reopened. So I think that's, super powerful. So here's an example of high school students and their summer reading project trying to determine the guilt or innocence of Adnan Saeed.
Welcome to Serial, a final project sponsored by Ms. Thompson's English class at Dalton High School. I'm your host, Jasmine Sutton. In the studio with us today, we have Mr. Damon Andrews, defense attorney for Adnan Syed, and Jamaica McFarland, the prosecutor for this case.
Carla, it doesn't sound like our audio is coming through.
Okay, I'm gonna unplug my headphones and let's see if that'll work.
Okay, let's try that real quick. And you're muted now. Unmute if you can. Swap it over. Yeah.
Here we go.
Welcome to Serial, a final project sponsored by Ms. Thompson's English class at Dalton High School. I'm your host, Jasmine Sutton. In the studio with us today, we have Mr. Damon Andrews, defense attorney for Adnan Syed.
Hello, thank you for having me.
And Jamaica McFarland, the prosecutor for this case.
Hello, thank you for having me.
I just sometimes wish they could look into my brain and see how I really felt about it. And no matter what else someone would say, they would see, man, this guy had no ill will towards it. Whatever the motivation is to kill someone, it didn't exist in me. You know what I mean? And it's like the only firm handhold in this whole thing is that no one's ever been able to prove it. No one ever been able to provide any shred of evidence. That's at the end of the day, man. The only thing I can ever say is, man, I had no reason to kill her.
We are here to determine Adnan's guilt or innocence. Ms. McFarland, let's start with you.
Okay, I feel like Adnan is guilty, and I have evidence to prove why I think he is guilty. Damon, what you think?
I feel like Adnan is innocent, and I have evidence to prove it.
Okay. Let's start off. Why do you think Adnan is guilty, Janiqua?
I feel like it's because he cannot remember where he was at certain parts of the day when Hayman Lee was murdered. If you really was innocent, you would try your best to remember where you was, the place, and the specific time. And he always gets mad or hostile every time the investor asks him a question. And how come Hayes' other friends was calling her to see where she was, and he did not call her?
I do agree that's a bit suspicious that he didn't seem to really care if she went missing or not, considering they did date for that long of a time. Damon, why do you think that Adnan is innocent?
I believe Adnan is innocent because of all the evidence that was included in the case seems to point towards Adnan, but it seems invalid against him.
All right, we're going to stop right here. So again, these are high school students that work together to so you can hear, them talking back and forth. And so I want us to go back and look at some of the different parts of the options for the definitions that we talked about earlier. And let's look and see. So we've got reason effectively. We've got use systems thinking, make judgments and decisions, solve problems. Did you notice any of those critical thinking skills inside that example? All right. So now so that was a high school example. This elementary middle example, the students were researching Ruby Bridges. And so here they had to work together with partners to come up with a Q&A with them interviewing the adult Ruby Bridges for, to talk about their experience. And so I have to give you just like a little nugget. I have a guinea pig that I use all the time. It's my kid. So this is the two of us practicing as I work to roll this out to teachers.
Hi, this is Cam. Today we're going to be doing a Q&A with Ruby Bridges.
Thank you so much, Cam, for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Question 1. How did you feel when your parents told you that they were going to send you to an all-white school?
Actually, my parents didn't tell me what was happening. The only thing they said to me was that I was going to a different school and that I should behave. And that's all I really knew.
So like I said, you'll have all of these to go back and listen to. But so again, thinking about, in this case, like we read the story of Ruby Bridges, we watched different clips, we watched some of her interview with Oprah, and then they had to take all of that information and create like an interview with Ruby. So there are a variety of reasons why students can podcast and to share their learning. So like the tool is really like you can use Anchor, which Anchor is very simple to use. It's a website. And what I do like about Anchor is that it's all in one. The audience, the audio options, like all of the audio that you heard on the second one That was already preloaded into Anchor, so students don't have to like find music or and that kind of thing. It helps with copyright laws, and so it's just really a one click thing. So like the Q&A example, to share with you how simple it was. Like I said, that's my guinea pig, and so she had never used Anchor before. And so after she got the questions and we got the answers written down and everything like that, it probably took us 20 to 30 minutes to record the whole thing. So it's really great. All right. So the next thing is something that you probably are already familiar with. If you went to Anna's fabulous session, I absolutely love Anna. She's phenomenal. But so deep analysis of text responses using a Flipgrid. And so we're going to look at the task that the students, and again, a lot of these are going to be my teachers because they're my guinea pigs, the task that they did. And so here for the task, they each were given a reading passage. And so the questions, this is the critical thinking part, right? The Flipgrid part, the Anchor part, that's just a tool for them to be able to share. So they were given a reading passage and questions, and then they had to summarize the main points addressed. What surprised them? What challenged, changed, or confirmed what they already knew? What words and phrases helped them convey the theme of the text? So again, it was like, in this case, it's always going to be a combination of the traditional and the digital tools, right? So we've got here actual text that they're reading. They have the questions that they have to, respond to and walk, and then after that, what they did was they shared their thoughts on Flipgrid, and then they provided them with a response. And so like my tips for responding, I'm going to tell you, I borrowed that from Linda Yolis in California. She has the cutest second graders who are probably almost in college at this point. But we use the same ways to respond and to reflect, using like the same ways that we use for our blogging. Give them a compliment, share whether they agree or disagree, add evidence from the text, and ask a relevant question. So when you look at the actual examples here, with Flipgrid, you can see here where we got to the first part.
Okay, Mrs. Lippett shared the good news she had with Jerusha in such a negative fashion because she did not want to give Jerusha the impression that she actually felt happy for her. She was still interested in keeping her prisoner. And one of the things that was throughout this story, Daddy Longlegs, was that Jerusha was a prisoner from the time she was an orphan, working there as well as going to school there. She was made to feel like a prisoner, that she's on their borrowed time, going through school, high school, and now she's still a prisoner because the person who's paying for her college is dictating to her what she is going to major in and how she's going to repay him, even though he's not interested in reading her letters. And she wanted to make sure that she felt like, that Brucia felt like, you know what, you're just here because somebody's.
So here, the students can here then add their comment, right? So they go back, they can add their video comment. I really like what you said about so-and-so. I'm not sure that I agree with this because the text says that. So again, the tool is just the way that we get it out to the world, correct? They have to explain why. They have to go back and share that with the text, because as they do that verbally, that is a connection to what they should also do, like as they write out their responses. Like that's our text-dependent analysis, is really responding critically to text that they read. And then here's one of my favorite ones. So analyzing the weather using WeVideo. And so in this particular example, they're the meteorologist, okay? So they're given a weather map, and based on what they know about the weather, they have to choose, they have to write a weather forecast based on what they know about cold fronts, low fronts, warm fronts, high fronts. I'm sorry, I don't teach science. But this is so one of the examples here that our teachers did. And so they had to choose a city, give a weather forecast, and these were the things that they had to include based on what they were able to interpret from the map and what they already knew about science, what they already knew about weather. And so here is the video now that we're going to show. So using WeVideo allowed them to use a green screen so that they could almost emulate what that weather meteorologist did. And we actually were lucky enough to have a meteorologist come in and talk to them about how different, like how they use the green screen in the news studios to be able to do this. So we'll show that video for you right quickly.
Good morning, Houston. This is Jessica, Ashton, and Drew with your morning weather forecast. We have a very urgent forecast to share with you all this morning, so please make sure you tune in. There's a hurricane warning effect coming from the southeast being pushed in our direction. These weather patterns are likely the cause of the warm, dry air masses coming from the north and the humid air masses coming from the Gulf of Mexico.
And this is Jessica. Also, our inland viewers in the area will be experiencing weather, 91 degrees temperature with warm and humid air, and our people living on the coast will be experiencing hurricane-like weather. For our coastal viewers, be safe, board your windows, do your best to stay indoors. For our inland viewers, enjoy that warm, dry air. This is Jessica, Ashton, and Drew, and it's back to you, Brianna.
So here you see, and so those, you can see Jessica also had on a green shirt, so she just kind of blended right in with the screen. But there are directions of using WeVideo to and green screen. Also, it was Jennifer. There's also the Do Ink app that I've used as well. That can be used on tablets and smart devices. So, and then the last one that we're going to share before we close out today is, so I taught ELA and a little bit of social studies. So math is totally out of my box, out of my comfort zone. But here's an example of one of our technology portfolios that one of my math teachers did. Where she had students to create math concepts videos to be able to teach their peers. So as I'm just going to give you a quick overview of our portfolio. The teacher has to embed their lesson plan so that we can make sure that the content matches, we don't want to see great projects but not be directly tied into content. And then we do also ask them to take photos of the in-progress work as they are planning and videos. And again, you can see these students work together. So that ties in collaboration, all right, and communication. And so then here's the student work, where students took different math concepts and they created videos. And we know that if kids can teach someone else or can explain it, then that means that they have gotten the skill.
Shapes is the units around the outside of the shape. To find perimeter, you need to find the length and add up all the sides. Just remember, when you have a quadrilateral, you should be adding up 4 sides. When you are finding the perimeter of other shapes, you need to have as many numbers as you have sides.
Hi guys, my name's Brianna, and today I'm going to be showing you how to work out area and perimeter problems. So for this first one, we're just finding perimeter. So on the bottom and top side, we have 12 centimeters. And on the left and right side, we have 9 centimeters. How to find the perimeter is we add all the outside sides together.
So again, you'll have access to all of those as you receive the presentation. Because we are almost out of time. And so I think, there are, again, other tools that you can use. Flipgrid, we talked about also Padlet for collaboration. The Chatterpix one is iPad only, but I love it. But a similar one that you can use on your Chromebooks is Voki. Google Slides is also, because again, it's the content and what they do with the content. The tool is just how they share it out, right? To us, to their classmates, to their parents, and to the world. Digital Breakout EDU is another really neat tool. And then here's another document with other critical thinking resources that you'll be able to have. Whew, time sure flies when you're having fun. So as you move forward, think about how can you model critical thinking and problem solving for your students? And I think it's just knowing that you don't have all the answers. What kind of learning environment is necessary to emphasize problem solving skills in your classroom, which pulls in the other 4 C's? What could you do to make critical thinking and problem solving more intentional and purposeful? How can you encourage students to be better critical thinkers and problem solving? And my favorite one is ask 3 before you ask me. So have them work with their classmates and their colleagues to be able to do that. And that is the end of my session. And this is the link to the entire presentation. So I think there's Voki is freemium, Sonia, I think. And so there may be some cost, but like I said, the tool is secondary to the content. So thanks, guys. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Carla. We have had such a lively discussion in the chat, and everyone has been so impressed with everything that you've shared. And they are so thankful for sharing your presentation as well. So we all are so appreciative for you joining us today. And everyone in the chat, please make sure that I'm going to give you a few more seconds just to make sure you've added something in there, because to win a prize that's been donated by Howard Technology Solutions, you need to have something in the chat within the last few minutes or so, about 10 minutes or so. And we are going to be picking that prize winner very soon. We are going to be giving away a Chromebook during this session. So just a few more minutes, and my colleague will be picking that prize winner momentarily. So let's see what's coming in for the winner. And the drum roll. Dun, 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 dun. Who's it going to be? Carlin Fritz. Congratulations, Carlin Fritz. You are going to be emailing me. We're going to post it in the chat. It's dana.rubenstein@palmbeachschools.org, and I will be sending you the information to receive your prize. Congratulations again. And Carla, once again, thank you on behalf of the entire Palm Beach County School District. We are so grateful for you to be sharing your expertise with us today. And on behalf of the entire school district and the EdTech training team, we want to thank everyone for joining us today. Have a wonderful afternoon, and stay tuned. We have one last session with Mr. Honeycutt will be joining us in just a few moments. See you soon.